Hey, good morning, everybody. This is Kenny. Welcome back to another edition of the Yak with Mac. This week, we got to sit down again with Gordie Tamayo, the communications manager for CARE. And Gordie really gets into some depth when it comes to properly communicating with our people. Listen in. Hey there, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Yak with Mac. And this guy, if he looks familiar, I've got a returning guest. And I am just so pumped to have him on. And I want to expand the conversation that we had before. Leaders, this is the place to come to. We've got some great content out on the Learning Podcast. There's a couple other podcasts that talk about leadership. This is just our sole focus in helping you, encouraging you, inspiring you to become better leaders, influential leaders, leaders that people want to and follow some more. All right. Gordie Tamayo, man, oh man, he's a communications manager from CARE in the Central Region. Gordie, thank you so much, man, for taking the time to
Yeah,
come back on with me. How are you, man?
absolutely. Yeah, thank you for having me. Doing great, doing great. This is definitely a good time of the year
Yeah.
where we're reminded to be thankful and grateful, and I'm definitely thankful and grateful right now.
Oh, that's
Appreciate you having me.
awesome. I know. I noticed you're probably thankful and grateful also for the Atlanta Braves winning the World Series. He's
You
got his
got it.
Braves hat going,
Yeah.
so that
Props to
is
all the
so.
Braves fans out there.
Oh yeah, that is so awesome. So I'm a Met fan, but I'm very jealous, very envious, and I think the Mets need to do what the Braves did. So we'll see, we'll see.
Yeah.
Um, Gordy, what a wealth of knowledge you are in the field of communications. The podcast, and folks, if you haven't seen it, go back in. It's still on our Learning Podcast page, and you can see the first one I did with Gordy a few months ago. And I have to tell you, it was so inspiring for not just me, but a lot of people. A lot of comments I got back. You have this great combination of having some of kind of I'll say book knowledge, but also the common sense when it comes to communication, whether that's broad communication or real specific, one-on-one even communication. And that's the road I really want to go down with you a little bit more today, and to talk a
Mm-hmm.
little bit more about what leaders can do to just get better at being a better communicator and even giving better meetings and things like that. But let me start
Yeah.
here with you. As this time of year, we get ready to go into doing, hopefully, we're doing one on ones and syncs every month. We're getting ready
Mm-hmm.
to do year in reviews, sooner rather than later. And some of those conversations might be a little bit difficult. Some conversations may be a little bit easier to have. What are some hints and tips that you have to make those monthly syncs and then this year in review just a little bit more rich? What can leaders do from a communications standpoint to just make sure that that's really time well spent and their message is getting across to the
Yeah,
people that they support?
for sure. Yeah, I think right off the bat, there's a couple things that come to mind. And one of those is maybe specifically targeted more towards, an introvert who struggles with even trying to get the ball moving in that direction and get it going down court. So they might avoid even engaging in that initial conversation. And to any of those that are out there, I would remind you of an old Chinese proverb that says, when's the best time to plant a tree? And it said 20 years ago. But the second best time is to do it now.
Mm,
And so we're capable of improving in any space that we need to, right now. Like today's the time to do it. So if you're hesitating, if whether or not you can even move the ball down court a little bit and get better in this space with communicating with your people, it's not outside of your ability to do it. I would encourage you in that space, first of all, that it's possible.
mm,
And today we're going to try to kickstart that for you. um, so that kind of segues into what I would say the first thing is to just do something. It doesn't always have to sound eloquent. It doesn't have to sound like you got everything checks and balances, that it's never going to fall short of what somebody might have been expecting. People want to see just authenticity. They want to see that people care. They want to understand that, hey, this person desires to have a communication with me. They want to talk with me. They care about what it is that I'm doing, how to improve myself. And so that's why they're engaging with conversation. So maybe that sounds a little fumbled up front, but if you can just get the ball moving in that direction over time, you begin to
awesome.
realize that, hey, there's something here. It goes with that old adage that it's said that when you engage with somebody in a conversation, right, and you have back and forth conversation for up to 7 times back and forth, you've officially established a relationship with that person.
Oh,
And
wow.
so it goes into that arena of saying, hey, once you've engaged with somebody so many times back and forth, you've now built some form of a relationship, right? It may be fragile, okay, let's say, but nonetheless, that's the building blocks for that next phase where you go a little bit deeper.
Wow, I love that. I love that. I hadn't heard that before. That's really interesting. First thing that came to mind for me was I remember when I used to ride the subway into the city every day here,
Hmm.
and I remember saying just good morning to this guy sitting across from me. And after about a week, so you figure that's 5, 7 days or so,
Hmm.
we
Right.
started really engaging in even more conversation. After just saying, "Hey, how
Hmm.
you doing this morning?" "Oh, I'm doing good. How are
Yeah.
you?" "I'm great." And for
Yeah.
the first week or so, that was it. That makes so much
Right.
sense to me. Just get started.
Hmm. Yep.
Just have that conversation. Any
Hmm.
things that let's stay on the introvert one. I'm glad you brought that up. Anything as an introvert, right, that I should be doing to prepare for that conversation?
Yeah. Yeah, well, and preparation is huge for one, especially somebody that's not prone to being in that space continually and, speaking in public, whether it's on camera or in person, like it's one of the greatest fears that people have. People are constantly wondering internally, how that's going to be perceived and whether or not people are going to get me or are they going to think I'm stupid? Is it going to make me, look a certain way? And really that all points back to insecurities that we have, right, about ourselves. And so, in preparation, this may sound a little bit cheesy, maybe, but it's something as a former introvert myself, I could say. And even though I'm very comfortable in front of a camera or with people, I still kind of consider myself an introvert, extrovert type of person.
Mhm.
But over the years, I've learned to navigate these waters in different arenas and understand how to do that. And one of the big things that has helped me prepare for it is really to try to get myself in a mental state of understanding that, hey, I'm not trying to wow the audience per se. I'm trying to get a message across, right? I'm trying to
Mhm.
take something that may be complicated and make it simple. I'm trying to just connect with somebody. And that's really what communication's about, right? It's about connecting with people.
Mhm.
And all too often, I think we're trying to hit a grand slam with things when really you're just trying to get on base initially, is what the goal is. And so I would say in preparation, the biggest thing is preparing your mind to say that, hey, I can step into this arena, I can step into this space, I can step into this conversation with somebody, and I don't have to hit the whole thing out of the park. I just got to get on base and get the conversation started. You got to get your mind in a position to say, hey, that's possible and I want to do it.
Wow. That is awesome advice. Just keeping it simple almost, right? And
Yeah.
just focusing on that, hey, this is the message I just need to get across. I'll get better at getting it across
Mhm.
going down the road, but I got to start somewhere. I
Right.
love that. That is awesome. So for equal time, and
Hmm.
I'm sure you probably coach some extroverts at times that might talk a little bit too much, even
Yep.
because I think that could be a thing too, especially if you're giving a presentation, which I want to talk about as well in a bit.
Yeah.
But what advice would you have for that extrovert
Yeah.
that needs to have that really targeted conversation
Hmm.
with one of the people they support?
Yeah, I'd say that one of this might even segue back to an introvert because an introvert, when they get nervous, they might start rambling off as well. And so this kind of goes into that space as well. But this is a good thing to remember for anybody that's listening. Be slow to speak and quick to listen.
Hmm.
Too often, we think that as the one that's initiating convo or the quote unquote expert of what it is that we're talking about, that we have to be the ones constantly getting the information out. But the reality is, a good communicator is a great listener. And so, if you are getting good at listening and you are cognizant to be an active listener, that gives you clues, that gives you insight, that gives you a perception into what that person is receiving or what they're trying to receive. And it helps you decide, how to move next. Because somebody that's an extrovert, they don't have a hard time talking, right? But sometimes what they might have a hard time doing is being able to pivot and adjust their style or their delivery to their audience when a person may not be receiving what they're trying to get across. Because people learn differently, people are moved differently, right? And depending on the subject matter, the delivery of that has to change up as well. I kind of look at it in 5 pillars, if you would. And that's, what are you trying to get across to an audience? Are you trying to educate them? Are you trying to entertain them? Are you trying to equip them? Are you trying to motivate them, or are you trying to inspire them? Right?
Mm.
Which one of those is it? And in some instances, it's a combination thereof during, a particular conversation, right? I can switch, but it goes back to what I was saying before. Like, you're not going to know how to pivot and how to adjust what you're speaking into if you're not listening. Because if you're not listening, you're just going off of whatever you might have memorized, whatever you've prescribed, and you're not giving your audience a fair shake at getting them the information they want to receive in a way that's understandable for them, which is the goal.
Wow, that is phenomenal, phenomenal advice. I love those 5 pillars. I'll make sure I capture that in the notes so that everybody sees that. And it's amazing as you were talking about that and you kept saying audience. In my mind, the same principle definitely applies one-on-one.
Yeah.
Just it's the same things that exactly apply.
Hmm.
That is awesome, and I think that extrovert that will tend to ramble on as well as the introvert. I love
Hmm.
that you said that because you're right. Uh, if we have those things in mind, it makes it just a lot more targeted.
Hmm.
Let me ask you um, a question that I got after our last talk, and I've gotten more as we get down towards the end of the year. I'm a new store manager, let's say, or I'm a new leader.
Hmm.
What are a couple of hints and tips to make my meetings
Hmm.
more effective? I've
Yeah.
heard from several new leaders that they really struggle with that at times, that they'll have an agenda, but they're not getting feedback from their team. If
Mm.
they're just presenting something, what are 2 or 3 things to start at to
Hmm.
make meetings and presentations more effective?
Yeah. Well, right off the gate, the thing that comes to mind is sometimes the best ideas are not our own. And so we tend to think sometimes as leaders, maybe this is a little stereotypical, but I've seen it true more often than not, is that we look at it as if we have to be the ones spearheading everything and moving along the whole time. When if you're leading a team of any sort, there's a wealth of information there. There's a wealth of ideas that are presented. There's a wealth of untapped talent that, given the opportunity, would step up to the plate if they knew the environment was safe and they were welcome to do that. And
Mm,
so it comes back to knowing your people as well, right? It's knowing what moves them, what inspires them, what is it that they're trying to do, or if they don't even know, what are the things that I have observed that are tangible assets within those people that we can draw out. And you begin to have that dialogue with people with saying, what is it that you would do in my
mm,
situation, right?
mhm,
Or what would you like to see differently? Like, the table's open, I'm open for criticism. I don't want to be wise in my own eyes. I want to understand, what you would do, and being transparent enough to come to the table and say, hey, yeah, I may have this particular role or a title or whatever it is, but nonetheless, we're a team. So when it comes to getting the job done, we're all coming to the plate with our abilities, with our assets, our skill sets. I need you to come with yours and be a leader in your own right to help us execute on what we need to get done. And so the first thing is not trying to be wise in our own eyes, but
mhm,
trying to look to the team for resources and abilities, and be candid about it, be open and transparent with saying, hey, this is getting a little dry for me, right? I'm not feeling what we're doing. I think we're kind of stagnant, or we're moving backwards. Like, we need to refresh this thing up. What do we do? What would you guys do differently? How would you do it? What do you want to see?
mhm,
Start
mhm,
asking questions, right? That's the first thing that comes to me. The second thing is this concept that you can only impart what's inside of you. And so whatever it is that we're absorbing and we're receiving eventually, right, out of the abundance of what's inside of us, that's eventually going to come out as well. And so I'm a big fan of being a learner, of being a student of life, a student of your field, so, quote unquote, being a master of your craft, so to speak, right? But that also means to pull resources from different areas that may not be right up your alley, but it challenges you and it causes you to think differently. And so many times, especially with the new leader, sometimes, that's a big load, a new shift, a new change, and there's a lot of responsibility riding on the line, and that can keep them from doing things that would equip them for that role better. And I'm a big fan of, hey, this preparation stage that you have where you're absorbing information, or you're getting coached up or counseled, and you're getting, the resources needed to build you up here, that pays dividends in the long run. So where you're trying to keep up to speed running down the lane over here, if you would have just taken some time back and gotten yourself in a mental state where you're not stressed out and you're not like freaking out over every single thing that happens, like you're going to get in that space if you prepare, but you got to take the time to do that. If you don't take the time to do that for yourself, the results will eventually show in front of your people. And so that preparation up front, again, you can only impart what's inside of you. What are you putting in? What's the input?
Wow. That is just super, super advice. So much, just really a lot of it is common sense, but so much wisdom
Mm-hmm.
there. And I think what I really loved also about what you said, it is if you're a new leader, and new leaders typically, and this speaking in general, will want that control at first, right?
Right.
They want it's okay, I'm going to establish my thing. But if
Mm-hmm.
you also right from the beginning also establish that, hey, I want to hear what you'd like me to say, of
Mm-hmm.
what we should discuss at the next meeting. Think about how that brings the team together,
Right.
as well, right from an early start. Um,
Sure.
I think that was all just some great advice.
A little
Right.
caveat to that
Yeah.
that comes to mind here is that, as a leader, obviously if you're a leader, you're a leader for a reason. Somebody puts you in that position for a purpose. And so you may be gleaning insight from your team. It doesn't mean that you have to go down every single rabbit hole that comes up and is proposed to you, right? As a leader, you're charged with making those decisions. But what you're doing is you're opening up the platform and telling people that, hey, you're heard and I value your opinion. I value your insight. I desire to understand what it is that you're bringing to the table, and so that just gives you options, right? That gives you the ability to say, "Hey, maybe I'm not doing it the way I should be doing it, right? Maybe there's a better way to do this." And so it comes back to that piece earlier I mentioned about transparency and saying, "Hey, none of us got it figured out." I'm not saying I got it figured out either. I'm here to get the insight from everybody here in order to do that, though.
Wow. That is a great caveat, and for new leaders to have that type of mentality from the beginning, the communication skills can't help but get better, no doubt, no doubt. All
Yeah.
right, last question for you today,
Hmm.
and that's, do you have one or two resources? What's one? Maybe I'll ask you this way: what's something that you've read? Because I know you're a big reader. You read a lot of stuff and articles and things like that.
Yeah.
What's something that's really hit you lately that you might would recommend for leaders out there?
Yeah, well, for anybody that hasn't heard of Patrick Lencioni, The Ideal Team Player is
Mm,
a book that I've enjoyed recently reading, and it touches base in this environment of how you're building a team, and so just gives you some insight that maybe you wouldn't have constructed up front of what goes into building the ideal team, and it's not always what you think it is, and so that's the beauty behind it as well. The irony is that earlier you said something about control and how as a leader we always want control, but the irony in that is that like we're never in control of those situations. Like we deal with people that are people. We're fallible ourselves, and so you're never in complete control. So trying to relinquish some of that, man, that's a stress reliever in and of itself, to realize like I can't force every single decision that I want to make. And when we can understand that and accept it, man, there's some peace that comes with that, because then you realize like I don't have to force this, circle through a square hole, right? I can try to do my best to kind of align things the way that they need to be, but as a whole, I'm not in control of the whole situation. But Patrick Lencioni, great resource. The other one, if you're a podcast listener, I'm a big fan of Entree Leadership. So I don't know if you've heard of Entree Leadership podcast,
right.
but they
Okay.
have different guests that they bring in there, a wide array of guests, everything from franchise operators to CEOs of other organizations, and just a wealth of information. They bring in a pretty broad array of guests into that space. And sometimes it's some pretty off the wall topics that, way over my head and, from some real smart people. But I always pick up a nugget or two from listening. And so that's one of the pieces I would say is that um, you need to dig for what is potentially out there, right? John Maxwell, he's definitely one of the foremost known leaders, right, or authors on leadership, and he has a wealth of information that's out there as well. Jocko Willink, right? I'm a big fan of Jocko as well.
Yes.
He's pretty intense with his stuff, but those are just a couple options that I would say, and to be open to just receiving what might be there, even if it doesn't necessarily fit with your season of life. There's typically something that you can comb from and you can pull from in order to get something out of it. I did that recently. I was watching some UFC fights over this last weekend, and in watching these fights, I was just pretty intrigued by watching some of the pre-fight build-up and the interviews that were taking place about these fighters, and some of them who were maybe reaching at the end of their career, some of them who were in their prime, but I was just kind of intrigued with the mentality that each one of these people brought to the table and how they lived out their purpose, or what they perceived as their life purpose, right, in doing this. So they were intentional about doing it. And that's what I'm trying to get at, is that unless we're intentional about the information that we're receiving, and intentional to say, hey, I'm not just listening to this as a passive audience, right? But I'm listening with the intent that I'm going to receive something from this, that there's something in it for me, then you're going to find it. But if you're not looking, you ain't going to find it.
You ain't going to find it. Absolutely. Gordie, that is awesome. I'll post those two out there, links to both of them, both the podcast as well as that book. And then I'll certainly put a mention of the other ones that you just mentioned as well. This has been awesome, man. You are I'm so inspired every time I speak to you. This is just awesome. Awesome
Thanks,
advice and great advice for leaders. And it's as busy as you are. I want to point that out. As busy as you are, you're always developing yourself, and you're always looking for other stuff to keep you developed. And I know you've got your hands full in your organization. So, man, I appreciate you coming on. And I'm going to tap into you again, right?
Yeah, no doubt. I'm willing and I'm here for you. You know, to your last comment there, I do want to encourage listeners to say that as busy as we may get and we neglect the development side, the self-development side of ourselves, I kind of gave a hint to it earlier, and I just really want to encourage you and emphasize the fact that, man, I can attest to this firsthand, that when you take the time to invest in yourself and develop the necessary skills and mentality it is to just become, a better version, right? 2.0, 3.0, 5.0 version of yourself. It actually makes your life a whole lot easier. And because you begin operating at a whole different level, the things that would have phased you a month ago, they don't have the same effect over you. They don't have the same hindrance, right? They become something that you just walk over, where before you were having to crawl yourself over it. And so that's my encouragement to you.
No doubt, man. Oh, well said. Well said. Absolutely. Gordie, thank you. This has been unbelievable again, man. I so appreciate you coming on. So, folks,
you got it.
Please share this when you see it. Share it with as many leaders as you possibly can share it with. It's just great advice, especially as we wrap up this year and get ready to go into next year. So we'll be talking real soon, my friend. Really appreciate you coming on. So, folks, this has been the Yak with Mac and with Gordie. We'll talk to you real soon.
Thanks, y'all.